Welcome back to Desk-Bound Aviator. This is Steve, your host, and you're looking at the Boeing 737, the ZIBO version of it. We've seen this quite a few times on this channel, and probably see it again, because ZIBO keeps changing this thing. He's made a number of changes recently that have befuddled a number of people, and I was one of them. When I say befuddled, I mean whenever you try to activate autopilot, it didn't seem to want to work. And so it took quite a bit of sleuthing to figure out why that was the case. That led me looking to ZIBO's site, ZIBO 738 modified, and finally after raising some questions about autopilot, led to a fellow named Patch99 who has his own page here in which he published a user guide to the ZIBO EFB, which is the electronic flight bag that I normally call the iPad. They call it an EFB. When you go on here and you go through the proper connections, probably this one right here that I'm pointing at, you will land on this page, which is a Google Drive page, and it has the recent issues of this manual that this gentleman produced for the ZIBO EFB, the flight bag, and it explains in quite interesting detail everything you need to know about the current version of the ZIBO EFB, or the ZIBO iPad. Very, very helpful guide. I'll put the links to these things, or I'll put the link to this fellow's site in the comments below, and then you can just connect to it here, because he changes it every day as he updates this thing. This is a 78-page guide. It's astounding that he does all of this work absolutely free. And you can download this thing, and it's very, very helpful. So, having said all of that, I'm going to jump back over here to SkyVector and then back to the airplane. And so the first thing we want to do is get this loaded. And to do that, I will call up with my letter G, the GAR, or the JAR Design Ground Handling System. So just which I can select right there and get a couple of baggage loaders and maybe the catering truck that go away. And while we're waiting for them to drive up, the fuel truck, because ZIBO will take care of that. We don't really need another catering truck right here in the front side of the aircraft. And we don't need the ground power unit, nor anything else on the side. So that's enough. The lower bay doors. And then let's see if our components, yep, here they come. All right, so while that's all taking place, let's jump inside. Turn off this alarm here. The warning doesn't mean anything at this point. Let's jump down here to the EFB, or iPad as I call it, the electronic flight bag. First thing we want to do is go to ground services and activate the GPU. So that is now connected to the front of the aircraft. And you see fuel truck here, but you can't do anything with it because first you have to dictate or determine what your fuel requirements of this flight are going to be. This flight being, we're going to fly from here in Oakland, California, KOAK, on down to Burbank, Bob Hope International Airport in Burbank. And so I have set up that flight over here, both in SkyVector and in SimBrief. And SimBrief tells us that we need total block fuel plus extra fuel is 7,000 kilograms. So having figured all of that out, let's jump back over here and we'll go to fuel weights and balances, or fuel weight and balance. A lot of these pages have changed. Some of them are active and functional, others are not. So for the time being, you can ignore performance takeoff and landing. Payload is active, And within payload, that too has changed. There are now 4 pages of information. Again, some of it active, some of it not. But for now, let's just start with page 1 and we'll enter our payload. Our payload brings us to page 2, typing that 0, and then if we enter our total payload here in the total line by tapping that, we can enter 14,000 by just doing 14 dot, and that will enter 14,000. And it distributes it appropriately as well as balanced with the center of gravity and laying out according to the type of cargo that it is. Let's go back here to payload again, and we'll enter our fuel requirement here as 7,000. 7 dot will take care of that. And that enters 7,000 and allocates it appropriately to the tanks that need it. All right, so having done that, first of all, you'll see center of gravity indicated here. We're not going to do anything with that yet because this number is going to change as we continue loading the aircraft. Let's go back home and we'll now go to ground services, and you see the fuel truck icon with a green pump on the side. Now that we've indicated or instructed the system what our fuel requirements are, we can go ahead and load it by tapping this icon. And now if we take a look outside, you can see we have a fuel truck next to our wing, and we have a loader, and he's got a ladder out there. Oops, let's try this way. Yeah, there he is with his ladder. There's our other elements and our ground power unit operating. All right, back in here, we can go up to the upper panel now and turn on some battery power and activate the ground power system. And we can test and see if that's active by rotating this panel light up here, and it is. I always turn on both engine start switches. I then come up here to the packs and turn those on so we can get some air conditioning to the cabin. I turn the logo lights on so people know who we are. I put the position light on steady, and I turn the wheel well light on so if anybody's down there working in the wheel area, they can get some light. I then rotate the IRS dials up to the nav position, and I rotate this dial, the smaller one, I'm sorry, the larger one, my bad. So the larger one, I rotate that 2 slots over to the STS, the heading STS position. I'm not sure what STS stands for, but I'll take their word for it. I then go down here to the normal central panel and flip over this upper dial on the glare shield on the left-hand side. I forget the term for this particular panel of instruments, but it's there, and maybe it's the MCP, yeah, the mode control panel. So I flip over the mode control panel to the plan view, and that changes the appearance of the map here. We can make that little thing go away. From there, I'm just going to jump right down to the FMC. We can clear that message out. Move over here, go to position init. Our reference airport today is KOAK in Oakland. And I think we're on gate 22, but maybe not. Let's just check. Gate 29, change that. All right. And we can go down to next and capture our GPS location and enter it in the IRS position line, and that will populate these screens with the screens that they need to be. Now we can go to the route page, re-enter KOAK into the origin slot, and then our destination is going to be KBUR. Like so. Flight number is Southwest 15 something or other, 1569. SWA 1569 goes in right there. Company route, or Yes, company root. We do in fact have a company root, and it is saved from SimBrief. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page here, you'll see a variety of ways that you can save FMS files and other formats, which I've already done. So in order to use that, that's stored in the FMS flight plans folder. So I'm going to enter KOAK KBUR01 into the scratch pad, and I'll enter it into the co-root slot. It says activate, which I do, and then it says execute. So the root is now stored into the FMC. Almost, not completely. What we do need to do is first dictate our takeoff runway, which is going to be 30. And now we can go to departure, pick the departure, and you'll see that 30 is selected. What I do want to do, though, is select specifically the SID that we're following. I just want to check something on whether or not you need to do that. Let's go to the legs page. Yes, you see we don't have that set yet, so I'm going to go back here to departure, runway 30. We're going to be using the Candel 4 SID today. We jump back, whoops, not to there, but to here. We're going to be using Candel 4 with a Cisco transition. I'm thinking of the word Candel 4 Cisco. And we'll enter that. All right, and we come back to the arrivals section of the route and pick that number, and that's going to be ILS runway 08, ILSY runway 08. The glide slope is indicated as on, and we're going to come down here to the next page and pick VTU as our termination of that approach, or rather our transition into that approach. The star that we're going to use is Rocker 2 and Red Hot. Rocker 2 and Red Hot, right there is our transition into that star. We'll enter that. Now, if we take a look at legs, you'll see we've got all kinds of nice waypoints and no particular problems or discontinuities, but we do have an issue here at the end of the route, and I just want to zoom up just a little bit. Whoops, let's fix that. Let's just pop that out just a little bit. Now we can come back in. You see here when we get down to this vicinity, there is VTU, and it's indicated as 4,500 feet or above, which is fine. Here we're at 8,000 feet at Ivans, and so forth and so on. What I want to do, what I want to do is eliminate a couple of these waypoints. So I'm going to take VTU and then jump back to the previous page, and I'm going to put VTU in place of Jeppy, Ivans, and the last one. So we'll do that and then execute that. Now you can see what our line is doing, and we'll step down a little bit so you can see the whole thing. So now we've got the line coming from not there, Red Hot, to Roker, down directly to VTU. We don't have an altitude yet at VTU, and when we get one, I think we're going to want to modify it. So let's just proceed with initialization of the route. So we go over to Performance Initial, or Performance Init, and all we need to do is just tap the L1 key. We've got our fuel loaded, and so we can continue filling this section out. We can put in a reserves of 1. A cost index, I'm going to go for a high number of 70, which will improve our performance. Our cruising altitude today is going to be 31,000. We get the crosswinds from SimBrief by scrolling down to the flight log. And within the flight log, you can see under TOC, we've got 323, or 32 knots at 323 degrees with a -1 temperature factor. 323, 32, -1. 323 with a slash, 32. Enter that in crosswinds, and then -1 for the ISA deviation, and then execute it. Now we can go to N1 limit. ZIBO has conveniently already posted our ambient outside temperature, air temperature at 14 degrees centigrade, which you see, well, 15 he's got posted here, but the FMC basically posts what's the existing temperature outside, unlike before. You used to have to do it yourself. Now it's done for you. We can then enter 40 as our SEL number. Go to takeoff page, flaps 5 standard. And then you can either pick this number up from the fuel page within the EFB, or you can just simply tap this and you will see it adds 27.5. So that number did change. And if you were to go back now to the iPad or the EFB, you would see that that number is now 27.5. It tells us what our trim should be, and so we need to go down to the trim wheel here, zoom in just a little bit, and we can just nudge that just a bit. All right, back to zoom in mode here, and we can click on these V speeds. 145 is our nominal takeoff speed, so let's jump up here to the upper panel. We can dial that in on our speed bug. A little too far. There we go, 145. I know from previous flight that 79 degrees is our proper course setting for landing at ILS runway 8 in Burbank, so that will remain. Our takeoff direction is going to be on runway 30, so 300 is correct, runway 30. Our cruising altitude is going to be 31,000. Whoops, back. There. We can, while we're here, we can flip the auto brakes down to rejected takeoff, and we can flip this little switch up here to make an adjustment in the fuel flow. Last thing, we can come down here to the nav radios, and our frequency at runway 08 ILS frequency is 10950. You get all this, by the way, from the approach plate, which is right here. Frequency 10950, approach course 079. The landing altitude is 778, but we rounded out to the nearest 50, so it's 800 feet. And our minimums is established here on this chart as 800 feet, right in there. You can tell what your minimums need to be. Our approach altitude for capturing glide slope is going to be 3,000. All of that will come from this chart right here. And we'll come back to that as we need to. So 10950 in both the pilot and the first officer's nav radio. We can then rotate the transponder to TA so the tower can keep track of us. Go ahead and rotate these light dials down here to get some light in this area. And that's about it for that section. Last thing I'll do here is put this back and get rid of those lines. I'll rotate this out to a decent distance so I can see the whole route. And we'll make our final settings here before we start to push the aircraft. What I'm going to show you now pertains to the acquisition, or the activation, I should say, of the autopilot. That's done by pressing the CMD buttons over here. There have been some concerns from a lot of folks about their inability to get autopilot to engage in the latest iterations of ZIBO. And what that's about is that in real 737 aircraft, you need to be flying on or near the flight path that you're following, and that's determined by the flight director, these two switches here. If this center dot, let me just zoom in on that a little bit, right there, that little square guy. When you are flying, you'll see a vertical and horizontal line here representing your flight director. You need to have this center dot on or near the center of those two lines, the vertical and the horizontal line. They're in red. If it is not near there, as you are departing, for example, and acquiring your flight, you will not be able to activate autopilot. You will instead get a red indicator here on your panel, and you'll get a horn or a beeping tone, an activation of a warning tone saying that you have not acquired your autopilot. So ZIBO has incorporated a couple of things that you need to know about in order to make this work, and they are located in the EFB. If you go to the home page of the EFB and to configure and customize, you'll see a lot of different things, and most of you are probably familiar with these and have gone ahead and set up preferences, if you will, for how you want this aircraft to function. Within there is realism. He's added one to realism called Autopilot Yoke Neutral Tolerance. And it has two settings, real and simply. If you set it to real, it's 10%. That means you have to have 10% accuracy in getting that little square within range of the crosshairs of your flight path. If you don't do it, and we're talking about right here in the PFD, if you don't get that little square within 10%, you're not going to get autopilot to engage. And that's not a very large margin, and a lot of people have found it tough to actually get it to work. ZIBO took note of that and added a preference here called simply, and simply increases that percentage to 25%. That means now that you have much greater tolerance in being able to get your system to work and being able to get autopilot to work. In addition, again, if you go back to this panel in settings and features, if you go to the visual effects channel, he's also added a feature called Flight Director Helper. And what this is simply is within the Flight Director, which you see on the PFD, the vertical and horizontal rules, if you are beyond the range that you have set in the previous panel, 10% or 25%, real or simple, then if you are beyond that range, you will see these lines, the vertical and horizontal flight director lines, blinking at you. If you see blinking lines, it means you're outside of the range. You won't be able to get autopilot to engage. If the lines are not blinking, then you're within range and you can try to activate autopilot. Sometimes it doesn't work, but most of the times it does. Today we're taking off on runway 30 and we're heading directly toward our route, so you probably will not see much of a problem in acquiring the position there and in activating autopilot. I've had occasions where it didn't do it the first time, it did the second time. So you got to get this thing pretty close to the crosshairs. That's the drill. All right, so having said all of that, I'm going to go back here and just make sure that that's in the on position. And you can set that, and now in the latest iterations of ZIBO, once you set it as on, it stays that way as a preference. So you don't have to go back to it over and over again. All right, from here, let's proceed to get ourselves started. Those of you who are familiar with this process, you can take a break or you can advance the video up till our flight time. But I'll walk others who are maybe not that familiar or need a refresher course in all of this, what some of the things are that you need to be concerned about in the Boeing 737. So we start that off by turning on I always turn on the left aft fuel pump, which powers up the APU, the auxiliary power unit. And so I press that button down and then press it again to start it. And you'll see this dial here start to ramp up as the APU spools up and gets ready to run. While waiting for that, I turn on the yaw damper. The other fuel pump switches can go on. There's nothing in this region that we need to do at this stage. We can go ahead and arm the exit lights, the emergency exit lights between the aisles, and get that system ready to go. We can turn on the window heat so people don't freeze their noses. We'll skip the probes for the time being and turn on the electric pump switches here. Trim air can come on. We've got our packs in the auto position, so we've got air conditioning. We'll leave that for the time being. We'll change our cabin altitude to our cruising altitude of 31,000 feet. And we'll change the landing altitude to 800 feet, as we recall from the approach plate. Having done all of that, we can tell people to get out of the wheel well and put on the anti-collision lights since we're getting ready to move pretty quickly here. Now that the APU is up and running, we can activate that, generate power directly from the APU. And when we're doing that, we want to have the APU bleed on. We can then turn off the ground power unit. And if we come down here and go to that panel on the EFB, we can disconnect the ground power. The fuel truck is already disconnected and gone. Tell that because it's green. And if we go outside and take a look, we can get rid of all the loaders and so forth by calling up the jar panel and just saying drive away. And they start doing that. All right. See if there's anything else to be done here. That all looks good. Got our altitude set, air on, power on, lights are okay. So let's go ahead and call up our pusher. I have a key to do that.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to go.
That's a pretty good position right where he is.
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
So while he's driving up, I'll take a last look at our glare shield panel up here. We have not got our minimum set. That's going to be 800 feet. Very difficult to get this thing to land right where you want it with a mouse. There we go. Our baro today, look at KOAK, and we'll see that the baro here is 3007. So course is set at 079, takeoff speed is at 145. We can activate our flight director and the autopilot, and now we can go ahead and arm the VNAV and LNAV systems. The LNAV in this case...
Tow connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Okay. The LNAV system does function now because we're within 10% of an angle on our takeoff runway, so that works. All right, so he's given us the go-ahead to get started. We'll come up here and we'll turn the packs off, and we'll rotate the engine start dial to the ground position. Then if we take a look down at the lower ND where the M2 designation is, that's the big fan within the jet engine number 2. That's now starting up, being fed fuel by the APU and being started by the power of the APU. When that reaches 25, you can go ahead and introduce fuel directly into that engine. Now we can come back here and start engine number 1. Same drill. As that reaches 25% You can then introduce fuel directly to that, and the APU is no longer running that engine. So we'll wait for that to get to 25. Right there. Okay. Finishing our push here.
Operation complete. Set parking brake. Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
All right. While he's doing that, we can take a look up here, and you see our dials have now rotated back to the auto position. That means we can go ahead and turn the packs back on. We can go ahead and arm the probes, pitot tubes. We can switch over to engine generated power, which means now we can turn off the APU and shut off the APU bleed. All a logical sequence. Anti-collision light is still on because we're on the ground and we're still in a
Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the left. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
Will do. So, yeah, we leave the anti-collision light while we're on the ground and we're moving. So he's taking off, and we will proceed out to runway 30, and I'll see you when we get there. All right, pull up there, take a look inside. Did a couple of things while we were taxiing. The first thing I did was went ahead and lowered the flaps to position 5, turned the auto brake to RTO, turned on the taxi light. So what we can do now is take a look down here. We can turn on the transponder to TARA, so we can detect and be detected by other aircraft. Also turned on some panel lights down here. A few chores going on while you were waiting to join us again. Now what I'll do is take a look at the upper panel, and we've got our lights set for the time being. I'm going to go ahead and rotate the engine start switches to continuous spark mode in case of a flame out on takeoff. I'll go ahead and turn on the runway turnoff lights and the landing lights. And we can change our position setting from steady to strobe and steady, and that will trigger an announcement to the crew that we're ready for takeoff. There we are. Okay, so this is going to be our route coming out of runway 30, and so we'll be going pretty much on a straight line for a short distance, couple of miles, probably enough to go ahead and acquire our autopilot. So I'll be watching this PFD here and observing the position of that little center square with the crosshairs of our flight director, and that'll be a primary concern during that stage of the departure. You may not hear a lot of chatter at that stage. I'm too busy. All right, everything else seems to be set here. Let's go ahead and release the park brake and proceed out to the runway.
Delivery, good afternoon, Emirates 208.
Approaching 30.
Emirates 202 for clearance, clear to Oscar Mike Delta Bravo Airport, VA3 departure, fly runway heading, radar vectors merit, then as filed, climb, maintain 5,000, squawk 1552, information, uniform is current, expect runway 22 right for departure.
on
Clearance
runway
for Emirates
30.
2080 to expect runway 22 right. Once airborne maintain runway
Give ourselves 50% thrust.
Departure. Expect radar vectors to position Merit, climb to 5,000 feet, KOAK 155.
My T key,
And Emirates
Toga,
208, Airbus A380, Alpha 6, Echo Echo Tango.
and we're off and running.
Emirates 208 Super, contact ground control 121.9 or 12 are ready to taxi.
121.9, 1 ready for taxi. Emirates
80 knots. B1, rotate.
Clearance Southwest 1307 LaGuardia, Romeo.
Southwest 1307 at West Logan, stay with West.
Positive
Yeah,
right.
we tried to see
You're up.
PDLC a few times and PDC, you're not getting any of them.
Southwest 1307, roger, clear to LaGuardia.
Flaps up
Airport,
one.
Jack to departure, Kelly, transition,
Lights,
Venice file.
engine,
Climb 10,000,
engine,
expect
lights,
level 390,
lights,
0 and
lights.
400.
1777, and you have an edict of
Gear back, or the auto brakes back.
1958.
And now we're taking a look at our proximity to the route. Get that rate in there, and bingo.
1000.
That's how it's supposed to work. So we are now under control of autopilot,
Southwest 1307.
and we will proceed up towards San Francisco and then make a pretty sharp left turn. And I have experienced in this flight, I've done this a couple of times, I've experienced some issues getting the flight director to initiate climb. So we may want to just turn the VNAV on and on and see if we can get that to function properly.
Clearance South 1661.
So we've got our speed up, so we can go ahead and bring in the flaps
Yeah, what are you showing wheels up time for us? Going to Philly?
to the 0 position.
Southwest 1661, I show an edict of 2052.
And that'll allow us to climb up to 250.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
See what happens as soon as we pass this waypoint if we start to trigger ascent. That looks good. That looks great. Okay,
Clearance American 8 1768. Good.
very nice.
Sure, we're reporting our passengers as we got a message from dispatcher of a revised meeting time of 22:41. Do you show that?
I do.
Okay.
Coming up over the Bay Bridge.
Not as of yet. Still Palmer to Spartanburg.
Okay, very good. We'll be calling for a push.
Down over the city. The new stadium, ballpark. Transamerica Tower is over here somewhere,
27 to Washington.
Air Shuttle
amongst all those high sky rises.
Via the Jack 2 departure, Kellen.
There's the Bayshore Freeway heading south toward the airport.
30 and 10, squawk 3506.
Golden Gate Park over there to the right. Up, you can't see it out that window. It's out there.
Maintain 10,000, expect 320 minutes, we'll squawk 3506, Air Shuttle 6027.
And we'll shortly be heading pretty much right over the airport.
Thank you.
And then down the valley a little bit, over the hills. Take a look down on Route 35 and Coastal Range. And then we'll make a left turn and head down towards Santa Clara and San Jose. And eventually on out over the valley, down through the Central Valley, past Bakersfield, and into the LA Basin area, landing at Burbank.
Southwest 186 affirmative. I have a full route clearance going to Tampa, advising ready to copy.
That's our flight today.
Southwest 186 clear to the Tampa
Very
airport via the
nice.
Schmaltz 2 departure, Wallet transition, direct Oscar
Climbing
Tango
through
Kilo,
75.
direct Tango Alpha Yankee, and today's 4 arrival. Climb maintain 10,000, spec flight level 340.
You can hear some ATC chatter there. That's a plug-in that I have that captures ATC chatter in the region that you're flying, and theoretically captures it for the type of position of flight you're in. I'm not sure that that's working properly, but it's interesting to hear that.
And I just want to verify that's the day 4 arrival.
And I've got that set up with a key so I can turn it on and turn it off. Very nice little gimmick. So you see now our flight director is right dead in the center of the two lines, the two pink lines that you see there. Let me just zoom in a little bit on that. The two pink lines is your flight director. That's your path. And so this dot in the center is your aircraft, and you can tell whether you're above and below the flight path or to the left or to the right of it by where that dot is relative to those two lines. In order to get the autopilot to work, you have to have that dot within proximity of the center of those two lines. If you have the setting on real, then it's a 10% variation. In other words, you've got to get that within 10% of the center of those two lines, which is not easy to do when you're flying a big jet like this and things are going a little haywire. So that's why some of you may prefer to use the simply setting as I do. It makes life just a little less complicated. It's complicated enough. So you notice our altitude now is hanging in there at around 10,000. We've achieved that, haven't exceeded it, and that's of course because at port, this waypoint, we have 10,000 B, which means below, and that's a altitude restriction. What we can do is go ahead and retract and turn off our landing lights because we're at 10,000. And we'll shortly be climbing beyond it. As we are now doing. Okay, we just passed red hot and we're approaching top of descent. I've gone ahead and dialed in 3,000 feet, which is our acquisition altitude, our descent altitude. And the other thing I did was I looked at our legs here, and on the next page, VTU was indicated at something like 10,000 feet. And that's really not a good altitude for that. In fact, on the chart, it's indicated as 6,000. So I went ahead and changed that altitude to be 6,000 feet at VTU. So we're just about ready to commence descent right now, and we'll see how all of that works out. Here we go. Now if we tap on the legs page, we'll go back to where we are right now. And what we're looking for is to make sure that we are on track to achieve all of our descent altitudes properly. Beginning with the waypoint right here, honks, says we're supposed to be above altitude 24,000, and that shouldn't be a problem. We've got quite a ways to go, and we're descending at a rate of 3,000 feet right now. I'm going to go ahead and activate the speed brakes to keep that all in tow so we don't exceed our speed limit in the descent. And you can see it's now coming back down into the 290 area, which is fine. Now that'll have some bearing on the descent rate. but not enough to make us miss our waypoints. There's our locator indication. And we've got 2 waypoints to go through, Silex and Buddy. Buddy is the acquisition point. They've got it indicated as 2753. It's actually 3000 on the chart. Close enough. And now that we're turning and we've got our locator lined up, I'll go ahead and activate APP. See the LNAV button extinguishes, which indicates that we've acquired locator. The VNAV is still a little out of range. The glide slope, I should say. But we are still descending on our way down to our target of 3000. And because we've got the APP system armed, as soon as we are within range of the glide slope, you'll see this little diamond light up solid pink the way this one is. And eventually you'll see this GS here turn green, and we will lose the VNAV switch, and I'll activate the second command switch, CMD over here, to activate our second system, to acquire it with both systems as a backup, as a safety. Notch your flaps. There's glide slope. All right, I'm going to dial this down to 140. And I'll go on auto, take the auto throttle off and maintain our speed manually. And turn on the runway turn off. Rotate these engine start switches to continuous mode. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the anti-collision lights, so when we're on the ground those are on. Nobody in our vicinity at this point, so I'm going to go ahead down here and turn off the transponder to TA. Continue to let the system guide us in for the time being. Okay, I'm going to kill autopilot and carry it on manually from here.
1,000 feet, stabilized, Mr. Perch, altitude set.
That was a pretty smooth transition.
Minimums.
And gear down.
Approaching 8.
Slide slow. Slide slow. Slide slow. Slide slow.
500.
Too low. Gear. Too low. Gear. Slide slow. Slide slow.
$400. 300. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Little bouncy.
$80 knots.
Well, that was a lot better than last time. We're going to pull in right here after this Southwest jet. Right into that gate. Looks like there's a marshaller out there ready for us. I think, unless that's somebody else. There he is. One more. Bingo. Okay, there we go. There. Okay. Take a look at the doorway and try to open it up. Here comes our auto gate. And what's supposed to happen here now is that the passenger is supposed to deboard, but I've never seen that happen. If you go in here to the home panel, you know, the end flight leg sign should be up there. It wasn't up there. So I don't know. Something's messed up. Probably me. I'll go ahead and take care of all these other lights and bells and switches here and turn the aircraft off. But anyway, that's the latest ZIBO. That's version 3.39.20, 339.20. Latest and greatest as of today. So hope that gave you some insights into how this EFB, this flight bag, works. This guy down here, some of these features in here, particularly in the customization area, realism with this yoke neutral thing, and visual effects, the flight director helper, and all of the issues regarding activation of autopilot. It does work. You just need to know what to press and how to handle that. There are probably some other things he's done in here that I'm not familiar with, and I'll be studying those as time goes by. He keeps changing it, keeps improving it. It's remarkable. So thanks for joining me today. This is Steve. Again, let me know if there's anything you're interested in, if you'd like to see that you haven't seen. I'll see you soon with another one, maybe some other different aircraft next time. Gotta make some changes. Have a good day.